"Spend the night with me," said the millionaire to the assistant who asked for help, her response. "Before we explore all the details of this incredible story, tell us where you're following us from and the time. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a thing, and let's embark on this journey together." She shouldn't have knocked on his door at 9 p.m., but desperation makes people brave. The 41st floor of Langford Industries was empty, except for the soft hum of computers and the distant city lights bleeding through floor-to-ceiling windows. Elise Warren stood outside Victor Langford's corner office, her hand frozen inches from the mahogany door. 4 years. 4 years of being his shadow, his shield, his silent salvation. 4 years of arriving before him and leaving after him. 4 years of knowing exactly how he liked his coffee, black, no sugar, and exactly how he hated surprises. Tonight she was about to become his biggest one. Elise took a breath that tasted like fear and knocked twice. "Come in." Victor's voice carried that familiar edge of controlled authority, even at this hour. She pushed the door open to find him exactly where she expected, behind his glass desk, sleeves rolled up, dark hair slightly disheveled from running his fingers through it. At 41, Victor Langford was the kind of man who commanded rooms without trying. 6'2", broad shoulders that filled his tailored shirts perfectly, steel grey eyes that could cut through excuses and lies with surgical precision. He looked up from his laptop screen and something shifted in his expression. Not annoyance, curiosity. "Elise." He closed the laptop with a soft click. "What are you still doing here?" She stepped into the office, feeling suddenly conscious of her appearance. Her usually pristine blazer was wrinkled from a day that had started at 6 a.m. Her natural hair, normally styled in a low bun, had small wisps escaping around her temples. She was beautiful, in an understated way, smooth, dark skin that glowed even under fluorescent lights, expressive brown eyes that missed nothing, a mouth that smiled easily but rarely for herself. "I needed to speak with you," she said, her voice steadier than her pulse. "Privately." Victor leaned back in his chair, studying her with the same intensity he reserved for million-dollar deals. "Sit." Elise remained standing. "This isn't professional." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe. In 4 years, Elise Warren had never once blurred the line between personal and professional. She was reliability incarnate, discretion personified. If she was here at 9 p.m. talking about something that wasn't work, then something was very, very wrong. "Sit," he repeated, softer this time. "Please." She lowered herself into the chair across from his desk, the same chair where she'd sat through countless meetings, negotiations and crises. But tonight it felt different. Tonight she wasn't his assistant. Tonight she was just a woman who'd run out of options. "I need help," she said, the words scraping her throat raw. "Financial help." Victor's expression didn't change, but his posture did. He leaned forward slightly, giving her his complete attention, something she'd watched him do with investors and board members, but never with her. "How much?" The question was direct, businesslike. No judgment, no pity. Classic Victor. 15,000, she said, hating how the number sounded in the expensive air between them. "My father, he had a stroke last month. Insurance covered most of it, but the rehabilitation costs. I've been paying for his care, and I'm 3 months behind on my rent, and my landlord—" She stopped, realizing she was rambling. "I wouldn't ask if I had anywhere else to turn." Victor was quiet for a long moment, his fingers steepled under his chin. She knew that pose. It was his thinking position, the same one he used before making decisions that affected thousands of employees. 15,000, he repeated slowly. "I can set up a payment plan," she rushed to add. "I know my salary, I can calculate exactly how much per month I could—" "Elise," she stopped mid-sentence. Victor stood up, moving around his desk with that controlled grace that made expensive suits look effortless on him. He stopped in front of her chair, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something clean and masculine that she'd been unconsciously associating with safety for 4 years. When he spoke, his voice was lower than usual, almost intimate. "I'll help you." Relief flooded her chest, warm and overwhelming. "Thank you. I can't tell you how much, but I want something in return." The relief crystallized into ice. Of course there was a catch. Men like Victor Langford didn't give away money without expecting something back. She'd been naive to think otherwise. Elise stood up slowly, meeting his gaze directly. "What kind of something?" Victor looked at her for what felt like an eternity. In the city lights streaming through his windows, his face was all sharp angles and shadows. When he finally spoke, His words hit her like a physical blow. Spend the night with me. The world stopped. Elise felt her face grow hot, then cold. 4 years of respect, 4 years of professional boundaries, 4 years of believing she'd misjudged him, all of it crumbling in 3 words. She took a step back, her voice deadly calm. "Excuse me?" Victor's eyes widened slightly as if he'd just heard his own words played back to him. "Elise, I didn't mean—" "You didn't mean what?" Her voice was steel wrapped in velvet. "You didn't mean to proposition your assistant who just told you she's desperate for money. You didn't mean to hold my father's medical bills over my head like some kind of—" "No." The word came out sharp, almost desperate. "That's not what I meant." She crossed her arms over her chest, armor against whatever was coming next. "Then explain." Victor ran a hand through his dark hair, and for the first time since she'd known him, he looked uncertain, vulnerable even. "I meant—" He paused, struggling with words in a way she'd never seen before. "I meant spend the night talking to me, being with me, not as my assistant, not as someone who works for me. Just be here." Elise stared at him. "I don't understand." "I'm alone," he said simply. "Every night, every weekend, surrounded by people who want something from me, money, connections, opportunities. But you—" He looked at her with something that might have been wonder. "You've never asked me for anything, not once in 4 years. And now that you are, you look like it's killing you." The honesty in his voice caught her off guard. This wasn't the Victor Langford who ran board meetings with military precision. This was someone else entirely, someone raw and real and achingly human. "So when you asked for help," he continued, "I panicked. Because I wanted to help you, but I also wanted—" He stopped, shaking his head. "I wanted you to stay, to talk to me like I'm not just your boss, to let me be more than just the man who signs your paychecks." The silence stretched between them, full of 4 years of careful professional distance and one moment of devastating honesty. Elise uncrossed her arms slowly. "Victor, I know it's crazy," he said quickly. "I know it's inappropriate. I know I'm your boss and you need my help and the power dynamic is all wrong, but I—" "Stop." He stopped. Elise looked at him, really looked at him, past the expensive suit and the corporate authority and the carefully maintained distance. She saw the loneliness he carried like a second skin, the way he worked 16-hour days, not because he had to, but because going home meant facing an empty penthouse, the way he trusted her with everything except himself. And in that moment, she realized something that terrified her more than losing her apartment, more than her father's mounting medical bills, more than anything else in her carefully controlled life. She wanted to say yes. And that realization would change everything. When dignity meets vulnerability, something beautiful and dangerous is born. The silence in Victor's office stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. City lights painted shadows across the mahogany furniture, and somewhere 41 floors below, New York kept breathing while their world hung suspended between confession and consequence. Elise stood perfectly still, watching the man who had just revealed more of himself in 30 seconds than he had in 4 years. Victor Langford, the CEO who could silence boardrooms with a look, who had built a multi-billion-dollar empire before most people figured out their careers, was waiting for her answer like a nervous teenager asking someone to prom. "You want me to spend the night with you?" she repeated slowly, testing the words. "Yes." His voice was barely above a whisper. "But not—" "I know what you meant." She took a step closer to his desk, her heels clicking against the marble floor with deliberate precision. "You want company, conversation, someone who sees you as more than just a walking bank account." Relief flickered across his features. "Exactly. Someone who won't ask for your credit score before deciding you're worth their time." "Right. Someone who won't disappear the moment your net worth drops." "Yes." Elise nodded thoughtfully, as if she were considering a standard business proposal, as if her heart wasn't hammering against her ribs like a caged bird, as if she hadn't spent the last 4 years carefully ignoring the way his laugh made her stomach flutter during rare moments when his guard was down. "And in exchange," she continued, her voice steady as steel, "you'll solve my financial problems. $15,000 just like that." She snapped her fingers softly. Victor's jaw tightened. "It's not a transaction, Elise. I'm not trying to buy—" "Aren't you?" The question hit him like cold water. He opened his mouth to protest, then closed it again, really thinking about what he'd just proposed, what it looked like, what it felt like from her perspective. "God," he breathed, sinking back into his chair. "I am. That's exactly what I'm doing." He looked up at her with something that might have been horror. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to insult you, I just... Victor. He stopped mid-sentence at the sound of his name. Not Mr. Langford or Sir, just his name spoken with a gentleness that reached straight through his chest and wrapped around his heart. Elise walked around his desk slowly, deliberately closing the distance between them. When she reached his chair, she leaned back against the edge of his desk, close enough that he could see the golden flecks in her brown eyes. I have something to tell you, she said. Victor looked up at her, and for a moment she could see past the expensive suit and the corporate armor to the lonely man underneath, the man who worked until midnight, not because he loved the job, but because going home meant facing an empty penthouse. The man who surrounded himself with employees and associates and board members, but never let any of them truly see him. The man who had just asked her to spend one night being real with him. I won't spend the night with you for money, she said clearly. Victor's face fell, but he nodded. I understand. I crossed a line, and I'm not finished. He went quiet. Elise took a breath that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than her lungs. I won't spend the night with you for money, but I'll spend the night with you for something much more valuable. What? She leaned forward slightly, and Victor caught a hint of her perfume, something warm and subtle that he'd been unconsciously noticing for months. The truth, I don't understand. You want company, real company. She tilted her head, studying his face with the same intensity he usually reserved for contracts. Then give me the real you, not the CEO, not the boss, not the man who thinks money solves everything. Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Give me Victor. Just Victor. Something shifted in the air between them, electric and dangerous and absolutely inevitable. And what do I get in return? He asked, his voice rougher than usual. Elise smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her all evening. It transformed her entire face, making her look younger and more radiant than any woman had a right to look after a 14-hour workday. You get Elise. Just Elise. Not your assistant. Not the woman who needs your help. Just me. Victor stared at her, and she could practically see the wheels turning in his head. This wasn't what he'd expected when he'd made his desperate, inappropriate request. This was something entirely different. Something that scared him more than hostile takeovers and shareholder revolts combined. This was real. No money, she continued. No debt. No power dynamic. No boss and employee. Just two people who've been dancing around something for 4 years and are finally brave enough to admit it. Elise! Victor's voice was strained. What are you saying? She stood up and moved to the window, looking out at the city below. From up here, the people looked like ants, their problems and dreams and heartaches reduced to tiny specks of light, moving through the darkness. I'm saying I've watched you eat lunch alone at your desk every day for 4 years, she said without turning around. I'm saying I've seen you work through Christmas and New Year's and your own birthday because you don't have anywhere else to be. I'm saying I've watched you build walls so high that nobody can reach you, and I'm tired of pretending I don't want to climb them. Victor's chair creaked as he stood up. She could feel him behind her, close but not touching. You want to climb my walls? She turned around, and the look in her eyes made his breath catch. I want to tear them down. The confession hung between them like a dare. This is crazy, Victor said, but his voice had gone soft, almost wondering. Completely crazy, Elise agreed. I'm your boss. Not tonight. Your father's medical bills. We'll still be there tomorrow. We'll figure it out. Together maybe, but not tonight. Tonight money doesn't exist, work doesn't exist, tomorrow doesn't exist. Victor moved closer, drawn by something he couldn't name. Then what does exist? Elise reached up and loosened his tie with careful, deliberate fingers. Not seductive, intimate, like she was unwrapping a gift she'd been waiting years to open. This, she said simply, you and me. No scripts, no roles to play, no reasons why we can't or shouldn't or won't. She slipped the tie from around his neck and set it on his desk. Just honesty. Victor caught her hand as she started to unbutton his collar. His fingers were warm and slightly trembling. What if we ruin everything? He asked. Elise looked at their joined hands, then back up at his face. What if we don't? The question settled over them like a challenge, and Victor realized that for the first time in his adult life, he was about to do something without calculating the risk first. Something impulsive and emotional and completely unlike the controlled, measured man everyone thought they knew. He was about to trust someone with his heart. One night, he said. One night, she agreed. No expectations. No expectations. No regrets. Elise smiled, and it was like sunrise after the longest night of his life. No regrets. Victor lifted their joined hands to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently, formally, like a knight pledging allegiance to his queen. Then stay with me, Elise Warren. Not because I asked, not because you need something from me. Stay because you want to. She stepped closer, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her body, close enough that her next words were a whisper against his ear. I thought you'd never ask. And in that moment, they both knew there would be no going back. Sometimes the most intimate thing you can share with someone isn't your body, it's your story. Victor's penthouse felt different with Elise in it. They'd taken his private elevator up 3 floors to his apartment, and now she stood in his living room like she belonged there, her heels kicked off by the door, her blazer draped over the back of his Italian leather sofa. The city sprawled below them through floor-to-ceiling windows, a glittering carpet of lights that made the rest of the world feel impossibly far away. This is... Elise turned in a slow circle, taking in the space that was so quintessentially Victor, it almost made her laugh. Everything was pristine, expensive, and perfectly arranged. No clutter, no personal photos, no signs that anyone actually lived here. Exactly what I expected. Victor, who had been watching her with an expression somewhere between nervous and mesmerized, raised an eyebrow. Should I be insulted? Should I be honest? Always. Elise gestured at the immaculate space around them. It's beautiful and completely soulless. Instead of taking offense, Victor laughed. A real laugh, not the controlled chuckle he used in board meetings. The sound sent warmth spiraling through Elise's chest. You're not wrong, he admitted. I haven't exactly prioritized making it feel like home. When did you buy it? 8 years ago. He moved to the kitchen island, which was larger than her entire apartment. Would you like something to drink? I have wine, scotch, coffee. Coffee sounds perfect. She followed him, noting the way his shoulders had relaxed since they'd left the office. Up here, away from the corporate world, he seemed younger somehow, less guarded. 8 years, and it still looks like a hotel suite. Victor busied himself with an espresso machine that probably cost more than most people's cars. I'm not here much. Where are you then? He paused in his coffee preparation, considering the question more seriously than she'd expected. Work mostly. The office feels more like home than this place ever has. That's the saddest thing I've ever heard. The words slipped out before Elise could stop them, and she immediately regretted their bluntness. But Victor just looked at her with something that might have been gratitude. Is it? Victor. She leaned against the counter, studying his profile as he focused intently on the coffee. When was the last time you had a friend over? Or went to someone's house for dinner? Or did something just because it was fun? He was quiet for so long that she thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible over the hiss of the espresso machine. I can't remember. The admission hung between them like a confession. Elise felt something crack open in her chest. Not pity, but understanding. She'd spent 4 years thinking Victor Langford had everything. Money, power, success, respect. She'd never considered that he might be the loneliest person she'd ever met. What about you? He asked, handing her a perfect cup of coffee in a delicate porcelain cup that probably cost more than her monthly grocery budget. Tell me about your life outside of rescuing me from myself at the office. Elise wrapped her hands around the warm cup, inhaling the rich aroma. You really want to know? I've been curious for 4 years. She settled onto one of his pristine bar stools, tucking one leg under her. Friday nights I usually order Chinese takeout and watch old movies with my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson. She's 78 and has opinions about everything. Saturday mornings, I visit my dad at the rehabilitation center. Saturday afternoons, I clean my apartment and do laundry. Sunday, I meal prep for the week and read. She took a sip of coffee. Thrilling, right? Victor moved around the counter to stand closer to her. It sounds peaceful. It sounds boring. No, his voice was firm. It sounds real. It sounds like a life, not just an existence. The sincerity in his tone made her look up at him. Is that what you have? An existence? I make money, I attend meetings, I make more money. I eat dinner alone while reviewing quarterly reports. I go to bed planning the next day's schedule. He shrugged, but there was nothing casual about the gesture. I wouldn't call it living. Then why do you do it? Victor was quiet for a moment, staring into his coffee cup like it might hold answers. Because it's what I'm good at. Because it's safe. Because... He looked up at her and something in his eyes made her breath catch. Because I convinced myself it was enough. And now? Now I'm sitting in my kitchen with the most incredible woman I've ever met, and I'm realizing that nothing I've built means anything if I don't have someone to share it with. The words settled over them like a gentle snowfall. soft and transformative. Elise set down her coffee cup with hands that weren't quite steady. "Victor, I know it's crazy," he said quickly. "I know we barely know each other outside of work. I know this whole situation is insane and inappropriate and probably a terrible idea, but tell me about your parents." The sudden change of subject stopped him mid-sentence. "What? You want to know each other? Really know each other?" Elise settled more comfortably on her stool, curling both legs under her now. "Then tell me about your parents, your childhood, the things that made you who you are." Victor looked like she'd asked him to perform surgery. "Elise." No fair using my name to avoid the question. Despite himself, he smiled. "You're relentless." "I'm interested. There's a difference." Victor sighed, running a hand through his hair. "My parents were ambitious. Dad built the company from nothing, worked 18-hour days, 7 days a week. Mom managed his social calendar and made sure his shirts were pressed and his image was perfect. They were a team, but they were never warm. Were you close to them?" "I was useful to them." His voice was matter-of-fact, but Elise heard the old hurt underneath. "Good grades, good behavior, good prep school, good university, good son to show off at company parties. I learned early that love was something you earned through achievement." "That's not love," Elise said softly. "That's performance." Victor looked at her with something that might have been wonder. "No one's ever put it that way before. How would you put it?" "I would have said that's just how families work." Elise felt her heart break a little for the boy he'd been, the one who'd learned to equate affection with accomplishment. "Not all families, Victor. Not even most families." "What was your family like?" She smiled, and the warmth of it seemed to fill the entire kitchen. "Loud, chaotic, full of laughter and arguments and people talking over each other at dinner. My dad worked construction. My mum was a teacher. We never had much money, but we had each other. When I graduated college, my dad cried. Not because I was successful, because he was proud of me, the me that existed whether I achieved anything or not." "That sounds," Victor struggled for the word, "overwhelming? Beautiful." The honesty in his voice made her chest tight. "It was. It is. Dad's stroke scared me, not just because of the money, but because—" She paused, surprised to find herself getting emotional. "He's the only person who's ever loved me unconditionally. The thought of losing that—" Victor moved closer, close enough to reach out and touch her cheek gently. "You're not going to lose him." "How can you know that?" "Because you're the strongest person I've ever met, and because—" He hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. "Because you're not alone anymore." The promise in his words was dangerous and beautiful, and absolutely terrifying. Elise found herself leaning into his touch without meaning to. "Victor, I know this is crazy," he said again, but this time there was no panic in his voice, just certainty. "I know we're from different worlds. I know there are 1,000 reasons why this is a bad idea, but sitting here with you, talking to you, being real with you—" He cupped her face with both hands now, his thumbs tracing gentle circles on her cheekbones. "This is the most alive I've felt in years." Elise reached up to cover his hands with hers. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I don't want this to be just one night." The confession hung between them like a bridge, something they could either cross together or burn down completely. "And if it doesn't work?" she asked. "If we try this and it falls apart, we still have to work together. We still have to see each other every day." "Then we'll figure it out," Victor said. "Together." Elise searched his eyes, looking for doubt, for the calculation she was used to seeing there. Instead, she found something that scared her more than uncertainty. Hope. "This is really happening," she whispered. "Only if you want it to." She stood up, closing the small distance between them until they were chest to chest, her hands resting on his shoulders. "Ask me again." "What?" "Ask me to stay. Not as your assistant. Not as someone who needs your help. Ask me as the man I've been falling for without realizing it." Victor's breath caught. "You've been falling for me?" "For 4 years," she admitted. "I just never let myself believe you could fall back." Victor wrapped his arms around her waist, holding her like she might disappear. "Stay with me, Elise. Not for one night. For as many nights as you'll give me." She rose up on her toes, bringing their faces inches apart. "Only if you promise me something. Anything. Promise me this is real. Promise me you're not going to wake up tomorrow and regret this. Promise me you're ready to let someone love you for who you are, not what you've accomplished." Victor looked at her like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking his whole life. "I promise," he whispered, and when she kissed him, soft and sweet and full of 4 years of careful restraint finally breaking free, Victor Langford finally understood what home was supposed to feel like. It felt like her. The hardest test of any relationship isn't falling in love. It's staying in love when the real world intrudes. Sunlight filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Victor's penthouse, casting golden rectangles across the hardwood floor. Elise woke slowly, disoriented by the unfamiliar softness of thousand-thread-count sheets and the distant hum of traffic 44 floors below. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then she felt the warm weight of an arm around her waist and remembered everything. Victor. She turned carefully in his arms, not wanting to wake him, and found herself face to face with a version of Victor Langford she'd never seen before. In sleep, the sharp lines of authority had softened into something almost boyish. His dark hair was mussed from her fingers, his mouth curved in the ghost of a smile, as if even his dreams were better now. They'd talked until 3 in the morning, curled together on his massive sofa like teenagers at a sleepover, about everything and nothing. His fear of never being enough, her dreams of opening a community center someday, the way they'd both pretended not to notice the small moments over the years, his hand lingering when he passed her documents, her unconscious smile when he laughed at something she'd said. Nothing physical had happened beyond that first kiss and the gentle way he'd held her as they talked, but somehow lying here in his arms fully clothed while he slept felt more intimate than anything she'd ever experienced. Her phone buzzed from the nightstand where she'd plugged it in. The harsh sound seemed obscenely loud in the peaceful quiet, and Victor stirred against her. He murmured, his voice rough with sleep. What time is it? Elise reached for her phone, careful not to move away from the warm circle of his arms. 7:30. Her stomach dropped as she read the screen. Oh God, I have 12 missed calls. Victor was instantly alert, the CEO sliding back into place like armor. What's wrong? My dad. Her hand shook as she scrolled through the notifications. The rehab center's been trying to reach me since 5 a.m. She was already throwing off the covers, her mind racing through worst-case scenarios. Stroke complications. Another episode. Internal bleeding. All the things the doctors had warned her to watch for. Hey! Victor caught her hand, his touch steady and grounding. Breathe. Call them back. Whatever it is, we'll handle it. The easy way he said "we" should have surprised her, but it didn't. Instead, it gave her the courage to dial the number with fingers that almost felt steady. Riverside Rehabilitation, this is Jennifer. This is Elise Warren, David Warren's daughter. You've been trying to reach me. Oh, Ms. Warren, thank goodness. Your father had some complications overnight. Nothing life-threatening, she added quickly, probably hearing Elise's sharp intake of breath. But Dr. Martinez wants to discuss adjusting his treatment plan. Can you come in this morning? I'll be there in an hour, Elise said, already mentally calculating shower time and traffic. She hung up and found Victor watching her with concern etched in every line of his face. He's okay, she said quickly. Complications, but not life-threatening. I'm coming with you. The words were out of his mouth before he'd thought them through, but he didn't take them back. Instead, he stood up and headed toward his closet with the kind of decisive energy she recognized from high-stakes business meetings. Victor, you don't have to. Yes, I do. He emerged with a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly salary. You said we were in this together, remember? Elise felt something warm and frightening unfurl in her chest. You have that board meeting at 9. I'll reschedule. The Patterson account review at 10. We'll wait. Victor, she caught his arm as he headed toward the bathroom. You can't just rearrange your entire schedule because... Because what? He turned to face her fully, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. Because the woman I care about is scared and needs support. Because her father, who I'm hoping to meet properly someday, is having medical complications. Because I want to be the kind of man who shows up when it matters. The raw honesty in his voice made her knees weak. This is really happening, she whispered. What? You, this, us. She gestured between them. Last night felt like a dream, but this... She looked around at his bedroom, at him in his rumpled dress shirt, at the morning light making everything feel real and immediate, and terrifyingly wonderful. This is real life, messy and complicated, and... Victor crossed the distance between them in 2 strides, and kissed her softly, cutting off her spiral of anxiety. When he pulled back, his hands were gentle on her face. Elise, breathe. She took a shaky breath, then another. Better? She nodded. Good. Now listen to me. His thumbs traced gentle circles on her cheekbones. I meant everything I said last night. This isn't going away just because the sun came up. Your problems are my problems now if you'll let them be. But your work will survive one morning without me. He smiled, and it transformed his entire face. Besides, isn't that what assistants are for? Handling crises when the boss is unavailable? Despite everything, Elise laughed. Are you seriously trying to delegate your own rescheduling to me right now? Would you mind? The request was so perfectly, absurdly Victor, that she couldn't help but grin. Give me your phone. 45 minutes later, they were in the back of Victor's car, heading toward Riverside Rehabilitation Center. Elise had showered quickly in his guest bathroom, trying not to think too hard about the implications of him having high-end women's toiletries readily available, and borrowed one of his dress shirts over her skirt from yesterday. She'd also efficiently rearranged his morning schedule with a series of phone calls that reminded him why she was so invaluable at work. Watching her seamlessly manage his calendar while wrapped in his oversized shirt had been oddly erotic in a way that made no sense, and perfect sense all at once. "You're nervous," Victor observed as they pulled into the medical center's parking garage. "A little." She twisted her hands in her lap. "My dad doesn't know about this, about us. I'm not sure how to explain." "We don't have to explain anything," Victor said gently. "I'm your friend who's offering support during a difficult time." "That's not a lie." Elise looked at him, really looked at him. The expensive suit, the confident bearing, the aura of wealth and power that clung to him like expensive cologne. "Victor, my dad he's not like the people you're used to dealing with. He's straightforward, says what he thinks, asks uncomfortable questions, such as what a man in a $1,000 suit is doing, holding hands with his daughter in a rehab center at 8:30 in the morning." Victor considered this, then reached over and loosened his tie. "Better?" "It's not about the clothes," Elise said, but she was smiling despite herself. "It's about, he's going to see right through us. He always does. And he's going to want to know if you're serious about me, because if you're not, he'll tell you to leave me alone before you break my heart." "And what would you tell him?" Elise met his eyes. "I'd tell him, I don't know yet. Because this is all so new and so fast, and I'm terrified that I'm going to wake up and find out this was all some kind of beautiful dream." Victor took her hand, threading their fingers together. "Then I guess I'll just have to prove to both of you that I'm not going anywhere." The elevator ride to the 4th floor was quiet, but it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. Instead, it felt like the calm before a storm. Not a destructive one, but the kind that clears the air and makes everything fresh and new. When the doors opened, Elise led him down a corridor that smelled like antiseptic and hope, past wheelchairs and walkers and the determined shuffle of people fighting their way back to themselves. "Room 418, she murmured, stopping outside a door marked with her father's name, David Warren. Through the partially open door, Victor could hear the low murmur of male voices and a television playing softly. Elise knocked gently. "Dad, it's me." "Elise!" The voice was warm and slightly slurred, a common side effect of stroke, Victor knew from his research on the car ride over. "Come in, baby girl." Elise pushed open the door, and Victor got his first look at the man who'd raised the woman he was falling for. David Warren was tall even lying down, with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes that missed nothing. Despite the obvious effects of his stroke, a slight droop to one side of his face, weakness in his left arm, his smile was radiant. "Hi, Daddy." Elise went to him immediately, kissing his forehead and taking his good hand. "How are you feeling?" "Better now that you're here." David's eyes shifted to Victor, who stood quietly by the door. "And you brought a friend." Victor stepped forward, extending his hand. "Mr. Warren, I'm Victor Langford. I work with Elise." David studied him for a long moment, taking in everything from the quality of his handshake to the way he looked at Elise. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "Victor Langford. That name sounds familiar." "Dad," Elise said quickly, "Victor's here because I care about your daughter," Victor said simply, "and because she was worried about you." The honesty in his voice seemed to satisfy something in David's expression. "Well, any friend of Elise's is welcome here, though I have to say you look familiar. Have we met?" Victor and Elise exchanged a glance. This was the moment of truth. "He's actually my boss, Dad," Elise said quietly, "at Langford Industries." David's eyebrows shot up. "Your boss? The CEO?" "Yes, sir." The silence stretched for what felt like hours. Then David looked from Victor to Elise and back again, and a slow smile spread across his face. "Well, I'll be damned." And Victor realized that the real test was just beginning. A father's love is the first blueprint for how a woman should expect to be treated, and David Warren wasn't about to lower his standards. Dr. Martinez arrived 20 minutes later, a petite woman in her 50s with kind eyes, and the kind of confident competence that immediately put everyone at ease. After examining David and reviewing his chart, she pulled Elise aside to discuss the adjustments to his physical therapy schedule. "I'll be right back, Dad," Elise said, squeezing his hand. "Victor, would you mind staying with him?" "Of course." As the door closed behind Elise and the doctor, silence settled over the room like morning fog. David Warren studied Victor with the careful attention of a man who'd spent 62 years reading people, while Victor found himself being evaluated in a way that felt more important than any board meeting he'd ever attended. "So," David said finally, his voice carrying that slight slur that made him speak more deliberately, more thoughtfully. "Victor Langford." "Yes, sir. You know, I may have had a stroke, but my memory's just fine. I know who you are." David's eyes were sharp despite his physical limitations. "Billionaire, CEO of one of the biggest companies in the city, regular features in Forbes and the Wall Street Journal." Victor shifted slightly in his chair. "That's right. And you're here, in a rehab center at 9 in the morning, holding my daughter's hand and looking at her like she hung the moon." It wasn't a question, but Victor answered anyway. "Yes, sir." David was quiet for a long moment, watching Victor with the intensity of a man who'd built a good life on the foundation of reading people correctly. "You sleep with her yet?" The blunt question hit Victor like cold water. "Mr. Warren, it's a simple question, son, and the answer matters." Victor met the older man's gaze directly. "No, sir, we haven't." "But you want to." Victor felt heat rise in his face, but he didn't look away. "I want a lot of things with your daughter, Mr. Warren." "That's one of them." David's eyebrows rose slightly at the honesty. "What are the others?" "I want to take her to dinner somewhere nice and watch her smile when she tries something new. I want to meet the neighbor she watches movies with and hear all the stories that make her laugh. I want to fix whatever's broken in her life so she never has to worry about money or medical bills or anything else ever again." Victor's voice grew quieter, more intense. "I want to love her the way she deserves to be loved. And how's that? Completely, without conditions, without expecting her to be anything other than exactly who she is." David studied him for another long moment. "You know what I think?" "What's that?" "I think you're scared as hell." Victor blinked, caught off guard by the observation. "Sir, my daughter is the strongest woman I know," David continued. "Raised herself up from nothing, put herself through college while working 2 jobs, took care of me when I got sick without once complaining about the burden. She's got more dignity in her little finger than most people have in their whole bodies." "I know that." "Do you? Because here's the thing about strong women, son. They don't need rescuing. They don't need a man to fix their problems or solve their troubles. What they need is a partner, someone who sees their strength and respects it instead of trying to manage it." Victor felt something settle into place in his chest, like a key turning in a lock. "You're right, I am scared." "Of what?" "Of not being enough for her. Of this being some kind of midlife crisis where I convince myself I'm in love because she's the first real thing that's happened to me in years. Of hurting her because I don't know how to love someone without trying to control them." David's expression softened slightly. "Those are good fears to have." "How do you figure?" "Because they mean you understand what you're dealing with. Elise isn't some trophy wife who's going to smile pretty at your business dinners and spend your money on shoes. She's got her own mind, her own opinions, her own life. If you think you can buy her or manage her or mold her into some perfect corporate wife fantasy, you're going to lose her before you ever really have her." Victor nodded slowly. "I don't want to manage her. I want to deserve her." "Then prove it." Before Victor could ask what that meant, the door opened and Elise returned, her face tight with the kind of controlled worry that Victor was learning to recognize. "Everything okay?" Victor asked immediately. "Dr. Martinez thinks Dad needs more intensive therapy, which means—" She took a breath. "Which means extending his stay here by at least 6 weeks, and the insurance won't cover all of it." The number hit the room like a stone thrown into still water. Victor could practically see Elise calculating figures in her head, adding up costs and trying to figure out how to make the impossible work. "How much?" he asked quietly. "Victor, no." Elise's voice was firm. "We talked about this. I'm not going to let you—" "How much, Elise?" She looked at her father, who nodded encouragingly. 28,000, over 6 weeks. Victor didn't even blink. "Done." "No." Elise moved to stand in front of him, her chin set in the stubborn line he was beginning to recognize. "I told you last night. I don't want your money. I want you. There's a difference. And I want to take care of you. There's a difference between buying someone and loving them." "Is there?" The question came from David, not Elise, and both of them turned to look at him. Because from where I'm sitting, you're trying to solve her problems with your checkbook. And while I appreciate the gesture, son, that's not what love looks like. Victor felt like he'd been slapped. Then what does it look like? David smiled, the first real smile since they'd arrived. It looks like showing up. It looks like being here this morning when she was scared, not because you could afford to rearrange your schedule, but because you couldn't afford not to. It looks like asking her what she needs instead of assuming you know. Victor turned to Elise, who was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. What do you need? She was quiet for a moment, thinking, I need to know that if I let you help me, not just with money, but with everything, you're not going to wake up one day and decide I'm too much work. I need to know that you want me, not some project to fix or some way to feel better about yourself. And I need to know, she continued, her voice growing stronger, that you trust me enough to let me help you too. Because this can't be one-sided, Victor. I can't be the one who always needs rescuing. Victor looked at this incredible woman standing in front of him, proud and scared and absolutely magnificent, and felt something shift inside him. A wall coming down, maybe, or a door opening. You're right, he said, about all of it. He turned to David. Mr. Warren, I'd like to ask your permission to court your daughter properly. David's eyes widened slightly. Court her? Date her. Take her to dinner. Meet her friends. Let her meet mine, if I can remember who they are. Figure out if this thing between us is real or just really good chemistry. Victor looked back at Elise. And let her take care of me sometimes too, because I think I need that more than I've ever needed anything. What about the medical bills? Elise asked. We'll figure it out. Together. Maybe I help, maybe we find other options, maybe we set up a payment plan with the hospital, but we decide together, as partners. Not me throwing money at problems and you having to be grateful for it. David clapped his hands together once, or tried to since his left hand didn't quite cooperate. Now that, he said, sounds like love. Elise stepped closer to Victor, close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her brown eyes. You really want to court me? Like we're living in a Jane Austen novel? I want to do this right, Victor said. I want to earn you, not buy you. She reached up and straightened his tie, a gesture so casual and intimate that it made his heart skip. Well, when you put it like that, is that a yes? Elise glanced at her father, who was watching them with the satisfied expression of a man who just watched his daughter choose wisely. Ask me properly, she said. Victor took her hands in his, suddenly nervous in a way that had nothing to do with board meetings or quarterly reports, and everything to do with the rest of his life. Elise Warren, he said formally, would you do me the honor of letting me take you on a proper date? Her smile was like sunrise. Yes, Victor Langford, I would love that. From his hospital bed, David Warren watched his daughter fall in love with a man who was finally learning how to deserve her, and thought that sometimes the best things in life were worth waiting for. Even if you had to teach a billionaire how to court a woman properly first, sometimes the most romantic thing a powerful man can do is learn how to be vulnerable. I have no idea what I'm doing. Victor stood in front of his walk-in closet at 6 p.m. on Friday, holding his phone to his ear, while staring at a wall of perfectly pressed suits that suddenly felt completely inadequate. What do you mean you don't know what you're doing? James Hartley's voice crackled through the speaker. James had been Victor's college roommate and was now his lawyer, which meant he was one of the few people who could get away with laughing at Victor Langford. You've been on dates before? No, I haven't. What are you talking about? What about Rebecca? Rebecca was a merger disguised as a relationship. We met at a charity auction, dated for 6 months, and broke up when she realized I was never going to propose because I was too busy with quarterly reports. Victor pulled out a navy suit, looked at it, and put it back. I've never actually courted anyone, James. I don't know the first thing about romance. Well, what does she like? Victor paused, realizing that despite 4 years of working together, he was only just beginning to learn who Elise really was outside of her professional competence. She likes old movies, Chinese takeout. She reads books, real books, not business journals. She has coffee with her elderly neighbor every Friday night. Okay, so take her somewhere that reflects that. Somewhere personal, not impressive. What's the difference? James laughed. Impressive is taking her to Le Bernardin and dropping $800 on dinner to show her you can afford it. Personal is finding out her favorite cuisine and taking her to the best hole-in-the-wall place in the city because you actually listened when she talked. Victor sat down heavily on his bed. I'm going to mess this up. Probably, James agreed cheerfully. But here's the thing, Vic. If she's worth it, she'll forgive you for not being perfect. The question is whether you're brave enough to let her see you try. An hour later, Victor stood outside Elise's apartment building in Brooklyn, feeling more nervous than he had before any business deal in his life. He'd traded his usual black town car for something smaller and less ostentatious, a silver sedan that wouldn't scream "billionaire CEO" to everyone on her block. He was wearing dark jeans for the first time in probably 15 years, and a simple white button-down shirt. No tie, no cufflinks, no armor. The building was a pre-war brick walk-up with character and charm, and the kind of lived-in warmth that his sterile penthouse completely lacked. Kids played hopscotch on the sidewalk while their parents chatted on stoops, and somewhere a radio played salsa music that drifted down from an open window. Victor realized he couldn't remember the last time he'd been in a neighborhood where people actually lived instead of just existing. He was about to buzz her apartment when the front door opened and Elise appeared, and Victor forgot how to breathe. She was wearing a sundress the color of warm honey that brought out the gold in her skin, her hair falling in soft waves around her shoulders. She looked beautiful and approachable, and completely herself, nothing like the polished professional he was used to seeing in his office. "Hi," she said, and her smile was nervous and genuine and absolutely devastating. "Hi yourself." He stepped closer, catching a hint of her perfume, something light and floral that made him want to lean in and lose himself completely. "You look different from the office?" "Perfect," he said simply. "You look perfect." Elise felt warmth spread through her chest at the sincerity in his voice. "So do you. I like the jeans." Victor looked down at himself self-consciously. "I wasn't sure. I don't actually own casual clothes." "You bought jeans specifically for our date." "I bought an entire casual wardrobe specifically for our date." The sales associate at Nordstrom looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language when I told her I needed clothes for courting someone properly. Elise laughed, a real laugh that made her whole face light up. "You actually used the word courting?" "I did." She asked if I was filming a period drama. "Well, you look very handsome, very normal." "Is normal good?" "Normal is perfect." She stepped closer, close enough to straighten the collar of his shirt in a gesture that was becoming beautifully familiar. "So, where are we going, Mr. Langford?" "That depends. What's your favorite kind of food?" "And don't say whatever you think I want to hear. Tell me what actually makes you happy." The question caught her off guard. In her limited dating experience, men usually decided where to take her based on what would impress her, not what she might actually enjoy. "Thai food," she said. "There's this little place in Chinatown that makes the best pad Thai in the city, but it's not fancy or..." "Perfect. What else?" "What do you mean? What else makes you happy? Movies, music, walking, talking? I want to know what a perfect evening looks like to Elise Warren." She studied his face, looking for signs that this was some kind of test or performance. Instead, she found genuine curiosity and something that looked almost like wonder. "You really want to know? I really want to know." "Okay." She took a breath. "Thai food from that place, eaten somewhere we can actually talk without shouting. Maybe a walk after the weather's beat again. Without pressure or expectations or trying to impress each other." Victor smiled, and it was the kind of smile that started slow and spread until it transformed his entire face. "I know exactly where we're going." 20 minutes later, they were sitting on a blanket in Central Park. Containers of the best Thai food in the city spread between them while the sun set behind the Manhattan skyline. Victor had somehow managed to find a spot that felt private, despite being in the middle of one of the world's busiest cities, under a tree that filtered the golden hour light into dappled patterns across their makeshift picnic. "This is..." Elise looked around, taking in the scene. "How did you even think of this? You said you wanted somewhere you could talk without shouting. I figured the park would be quieter than most restaurants." He opened a container of pad thai and handed it to her with chopsticks. "Plus, I've never actually had a picnic before." "Never. Never. My idea of outdoor dining was eating on the terrace of whatever five-star restaurant had the best view." He opened his own container, looking slightly bewildered by the chopsticks. "I'm probably going to embarrass myself trying to eat with these." "Here." Elise scooted closer, showing him how to hold them properly. "Like this. Relax your grip a little." Her hands were warm and patient as she guided his fingers, and Victor found himself focusing more on the feeling of her touch than on the mechanics of chopstick usage. When she looked up to check his progress, their faces were inches apart. "Better?" she asked softly. "Much better," he said, but he wasn't talking about the chopsticks. They ate as the sun sank lower, talking about everything and nothing. Victor told her about his college roommate, James, and how he'd convinced him to buy the jeans. Elise told him about Mrs. Patterson's opinions on modern romance. If a man doesn't court you properly, honey, he's not worth your time. And her father's reaction to meeting him: he likes you, but he's going to test you every time you visit until he's sure you're serious. And what do you think? Victor asked. Am I serious? Elise considered the question while twirling noodles around her chopsticks. I think you're trying to figure out how to be serious, which is actually more impressive. How so? Because it's harder. Anyone can throw money at something and call it romance. Learning how to actually connect with someone, that takes courage. Victor set down his chopsticks and really looked at her. I've never felt like this before. Like what? Like I want to know everything about you. Not just the professional you, but all of you. What you dream about, what makes you laugh, what scares you, what you want from life that you've never told anyone. He paused. Like I want to deserve the way you look at me. How do I look at you? Like you see something good in me that I'm not sure exists. Elise reached over and took his hand. Victor, look at me. He did. You left work early, work that I know is everything to you, to sit in a hospital room with my father. You asked his permission to date me instead of just assuming you had the right. You bought jeans because you wanted to look approachable for our date. You brought me to a park for Thai food instead of some fancy restaurant because I said I wanted to be able to talk. Her thumb traced gentle circles on his knuckles. You don't need to deserve how I look at you. You already do. Something shifted in Victor's chest, like a knot he'd carried for years finally coming undone. I've spent my whole life thinking I had to earn love through achievement, that I wasn't worth anything unless I was successful and perfect and in control. And now? Now I'm sitting on a blanket in Central Park, failing spectacularly at eating with chopsticks, and I've never felt more myself in my life. Elise leaned forward and kissed him softly, briefly, a promise of more to come. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright with tears she wasn't trying to hide. That, she said, is the man I'm falling in love with. Victor felt his heart stop and restart. Are you? Falling in love with me? Completely, terrifyingly, absolutely. He cupped her face in his hands, marveling at how someone so strong could feel so delicate under his touch. I love you too. The words came out easier than he'd expected, as natural as breathing, and for the first time in his adult life, Victor Langford understood the difference between wanting someone and choosing them. As the stars started to appear overhead, they packed up their picnic and walked hand in hand through the park, talking about first dates and second chances, and the kind of future that neither of them had dared to imagine before tonight. And Victor realized that the best investment he'd ever made wasn't in his company. It was in learning how to love someone properly. Love is easy when it's just the two of you. The real test comes when you have to love each other in front of the world. 3 weeks into their relationship, Victor discovered that dating Elise Warren came with complications he'd never anticipated. Not the obvious ones: the media attention, the whispered conversations at charity galas, the raised eyebrows from his board members. Those he could handle with the same ruthless efficiency he brought to hostile takeovers. The real complication was much simpler and infinitely more terrifying. He was falling deeper in love with her every day, and she was about to meet his world. I don't understand why this is such a big deal, Elise said, adjusting the neckline of her black cocktail dress for the third time. It's just a dinner party. Victor paused in tying his bow tie, an actual bow tie, not the clip-on version he'd apparently been wearing wrong his entire adult life until Elise had gently corrected him. It's not just a dinner party. It's the Harrison Foundation Gala. 500 of the city's most influential people, all of whom will be watching us like we're the evening's entertainment. Watching us why? Because Victor Langford doesn't bring dates to public events. Ever. He turned from the mirror in his bedroom to look at her. Because you're beautiful and brilliant and completely yourself, and that's going to intimidate the hell out of people who've spent their lives pretending to be someone else. Elise smoothed her hands down her dress, a simple but elegant black number that Victor had bought for her after she'd mentioned not owning anything appropriate for galas. She'd initially refused, but he'd pointed out that this fell under figuring things out together rather than throwing money at problems, and she'd grudgingly agreed. Now, looking at herself in the mirror of Victor's bedroom, she felt like she was playing dress-up in someone else's life. What if they don't like me? She asked quietly. Victor crossed the room in 3 strides and took her hands in his. Then they have terrible judgment and questionable taste. Victor, I'm serious. These people, they're your peers, your business associates. What if I say the wrong thing? What if I use the wrong fork or laugh too loud or... Elise. His voice was gentle but firm. Look at me. She did, and found his grey eyes steady and sure. I don't give a damn what they think about which fork you use. I care about what you think about them. I care about whether you're comfortable and happy and feeling like yourself. He lifted their joined hands to his lips, kissing her knuckles softly. Besides, I have a feeling they're going to love you. How could they not? An hour later, standing in the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel, Elise was beginning to understand what Victor had been trying to prepare her for. The room was a sea of designer gowns and tailored tuxedos, crystal champagne flutes, and carefully modulated laughter. Everyone looked like they'd stepped off the pages of Vogue, and everyone seemed to know everyone else, and they were all staring at her. Victor, darling. A woman with silver hair and diamonds that probably cost more than Elise's annual salary glided over to them. How wonderful to see you. And you must be the mysterious woman we've all been hearing about. Margaret Whitmore. This is Elise Warren, Victor said smoothly. Elise, Margaret is on the board of the Harrison Foundation. It's lovely to meet you, Elise said, extending her hand. Margaret took it with the kind of smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Warren, that's an interesting name. Are you from the Connecticut Warrens? No, ma'am, Brooklyn. Oh, the word carried volumes of meaning. How refreshing. And what is it that you do, dear? Elise felt Victor tense slightly beside her, but his hand on her back was warm and reassuring. I'm an executive assistant. How interesting. And where do you work? Langford Industries, actually. The silence that followed was deafening. Margaret's smile became even more strained, and Elise could practically hear the wheels turning in the older woman's head as she processed the implications. I see, Margaret said finally. How modern. Before Elise could respond, Victor stepped forward slightly, his voice carrying the kind of quiet authority that could silence boardrooms. Elise is the most competent and intelligent woman I've ever worked with, he said. The company runs more smoothly because of her, and I'm incredibly fortunate that she agreed to take a chance on me personally as well as professionally. The message was clear. Attack her, and you attack me. Margaret got it immediately. Of course, she said, her smile becoming marginally more genuine. Well, I'm sure you'll both enjoy the evening. The cause is quite worthy. As she glided away, Elise let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. That was awful, Victor finished grimly. I'm sorry, Margaret's always been a snob, but I thought... It's fine, Elise interrupted, though they both knew it wasn't. I expected some of this. No, it's not fine, and you shouldn't have to expect it. Before Victor could say more, another couple approached them, this time a man Victor's age with kind eyes, and a woman who looked genuinely delighted to meet them. Vic! The man clapped Victor on the shoulder. About time you brought someone to one of these torture sessions. James Hartley, he said to Elise, extending his hand. Vic's oldest friend and current lawyer. This is my wife, Sarah. Elise Warren, she replied, immediately feeling more at ease with James's genuine warmth. Elise! Sarah's smile was radiant. I've been dying to meet you. James has told me all about how Victor's been walking around the office actually humming, and wearing jeans to work on Fridays. He does not hum, Victor protested. He absolutely hums, James confirmed. Yesterday it was The Way You Look Tonight, completely out of tune, but the sentiment was there. Elise looked at Victor with delighted surprise. You hum? Apparently I hum, Victor admitted, his cheeks slightly pink. It's adorable, Sarah declared. Victor, you look happier than I've seen you in, well, ever. And Elise, that dress is stunning. Where did you find it? Victor actually picked it out, Elise said. I was terrified I'd choose something completely inappropriate. He has excellent taste, Sarah said approvingly, much better than James, who once tried to take me to a black tie event in a cocktail dress because he didn't understand the difference. The conversation flowed naturally from there, and Elise began to relax. James and Sarah were normal people. Successful and wealthy, yes, but warm and funny and genuinely interested in getting to know her rather than sizing her up. It was going well until dinner was announced, and they were seated at Victor's usual table, directly in front of the stage, surrounded by the Foundation's biggest donors and most influential board members. So, Elise, said the man to her left, a silver-haired gentleman with calculating eyes. Victor tells us you're quite the asset to his company. Tell me, what's your educational background? I have a bachelor's degree from Brooklyn College, Elise replied evenly. Brooklyn College, he repeated, as if testing how the words tasted. Not Ivy League, then? No, sir. I worked my way through school, so I needed something I could afford. How admirable. And your family? Are they in business as well? Elise felt the familiar tightness in her chest that came with being interrogated about her background. My father worked construction. My mother was a teacher. Blue collar, the man said, nodding as if this explained everything. Well, there's certainly nothing wrong with honest work. The condescension in his tone was subtle but unmistakable, and Elise felt heat rise in her cheeks. Beside her, Victor had gone very still, his jaw tight with barely controlled anger. You're absolutely right, Victor said, his voice deceptively calm. There's nothing wrong with honest work. Unlike some people in this room, Elise has actually earned everything she has through merit and hard work, not inheritance or family connections. The barb hit its mark. The man's smile faltered slightly, and several other people at the table suddenly became very interested in their salad courses. Of course, the man said stiffly. I didn't mean to imply otherwise. I'm sure you didn't, Victor replied, but his tone suggested he thought exactly the opposite. The dinner continued with stilted conversation and careful politeness, but Elise could feel the undercurrents of judgment and speculation swirling around her. When the speeches began, she found herself only half listening, too aware of the whispered conversations happening at nearby tables. Never thought we'd see Victor with someone so, obviously after his money, inappropriate for someone in his position. Each whisper felt like a small cut, and by the time they reached the fundraising portion of the evening, Elise felt raw and exposed. When Victor excused himself to speak briefly with another board member, Sarah leaned over to her. Don't let them get to you, she said quietly. They're just jealous. Jealous of what? Of the fact that Victor looks at you like you hung the moon, and none of their carefully arranged society marriages have ever inspired that kind of devotion. Sarah's smile was sympathetic, but firm. Trust me, I've been watching this crowd for 15 years. I've never seen Victor look at anyone the way he looks at you. When Victor returned, he immediately sensed the change in her demeanor. What's wrong? Nothing, Elise said, but her smile was strained. Just tired, I think. Victor studied her face, then looked around the table, taking in the carefully neutral expressions and the way conversation stopped whenever he looked in their direction. His eyes went cold. We're leaving, he said quietly. Victor, no. The evening isn't over. It is for us. He stood and helped her from her chair. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for a lovely evening. Please excuse us. He guided Elise out of the ballroom with the kind of controlled urgency that made it clear they were leaving because he wanted to, not because they were running away. Once they were in the privacy of his car, the facade cracked. I'm sorry, Victor said, his voice rough with anger and regret. I should have known they'd be like that. I should have prepared you better or not brought you at all, or... Victor. Elise's voice was quiet but steady. Look at me. He did, and she could see the fury and self-recrimination warring in his expression. I'm okay, she said. It wasn't fun, but I'm okay. No, you're not, and you shouldn't have to pretend to be. Victor ran his hands through his hair, destroying the perfect styling. God, Elise, I'm so sorry. Those people, they think because they were born into the right families and went to the right schools, they're somehow better than everyone else. They don't know the first thing about real value or real worth. They know you, Elise pointed out, and they respect you. They respect my money and my influence. That's not the same thing. Victor took her hands in his. Elise, I need you to understand something. What happened tonight? That's not a reflection of you. That's a reflection of them, of their narrow-mindedness and insecurity and fear of anything real or authentic. Elise was quiet for a moment, processing the evening. Is this what it's always going to be like? People judging whether I'm good enough for you? I don't know, Victor admitted. Maybe. Some of them, anyway. But I need you to know that their opinion doesn't matter to me. Not even a little bit. It should matter, Elise said softly. These are your friends, your business associates. If they don't approve, then they're not really my friends. Victor's voice was firm. Elise, I've spent my entire adult life surrounded by people who smile to my face because of what I can do for them. Tonight, I watched them treat the woman I love with barely disguised contempt, and I realized something. I don't want their approval. I want yours. The words hung between them in the quiet of the car, simple and profound, and absolutely true. You have it, Elise said softly. You've had it from the moment you asked my father's permission to court me properly. Victor lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her palm. Then, that's all I need. As they drove through the city streets, Elise looked out at the lights blurring past and realized something important. She didn't need these people to accept her. She just needed to accept herself, and maybe, sometimes, love meant choosing each other over the approval of the world. Even when the world was watching. The real test of love isn't surviving the storm, it's learning to dance in the rain together. Sunday morning, 3 days after the Harrison Foundation Gala, Elise woke up in Victor's arms to the smell of coffee and something burning. Victor. She sat up, disoriented by the unfamiliar combination of his expensive sheets and the acrid smell of smoke. What's that smell? From the kitchen came a colorful string of curses that would have made a construction worker blush, followed by the sound of something metallic hitting the floor. Elise grabbed one of Victor's dress shirts from the floor, the same one he'd worn to the gala, now wrinkled from being hastily discarded, and padded barefoot to the kitchen to find chaos. Victor stood at his state-of-the-art stove, wearing nothing but pajama pants and an expression of complete bewilderment, staring at what appeared to be the charred remains of pancakes. The smoke alarm was beeping insistently, and every surface of his pristine kitchen was covered in flour, eggshells, and what looked like an entire carton of spilled milk. "Don't say anything," he warned without looking at her. "I wasn't going to say anything." Elise bit her lip to keep from laughing as she reached up to silence the smoke alarm. "What exactly were you trying to make?" "Breakfast. A romantic Sunday morning breakfast in bed." Victor gestured helplessly at the disaster around him. "I watched 3 YouTube videos. 3. How is this so complicated?" Elise finally lost the battle with her laughter, doubling over as giggles escaped her. "Oh my God, Victor. You've never cooked anything before, have you?" "I can make coffee," he said defensively, "and I'm excellent at ordering takeout." "Those don't count." Elise surveyed the damage, shaking her head in amazement. "How did you get pancake batter on the ceiling?" "I don't want to talk about it." She stood on her tiptoes and kissed his cheek, tasting flour and frustration. "You're adorable when you're domestically challenged. I'm a 41-year-old billionaire. I shouldn't be domestically challenged." "Says who?" Elise opened his refrigerator, which was embarrassingly empty except for expensive wine, leftover Chinese takeout, and a single container of yogurt that had probably expired months ago. "Victor, what do you actually eat? Restaurant food, catered meetings, whatever my housekeeper leaves in the refrigerator twice a week." "Your housekeeper cooks for you?" "She leaves prepared meals with heating instructions. I'm not completely helpless." Victor leaned against the counter, watching her inventory his pathetic food stores. "This was supposed to be romantic. I wanted to take care of you for once." The vulnerability in his voice made Elise turn around. "Hey." She moved to stand in front of him, placing her hands on his chest. "You want to take care of me?" "More than anything." "Then come on. Where are we going?" "Grocery shopping." Victor blinked. "Grocery shopping?" "Yes. And then we're coming back here and you're going to learn to cook. Really cook. Because if we're going to do this relationship, this life together, you need to know how to make more than coffee and reservations." An hour later, Victor found himself pushing a shopping cart through a supermarket for the first time in his adult life, following Elise as she navigated the aisles with the efficiency of someone who'd been doing this since childhood. "This is surreal," he murmured, watching her compare prices on different brands of pasta sauce. "What's surreal? I'm in a grocery store, in jeans, at 10 in the morning on a Sunday, with the woman I love, who's teaching me the difference between marinara and arrabbiata." Victor shook his head. 6 months ago, if someone had told me this was how I'd be spending my weekend, you'd have had them committed. I'd have laughed them out of the room. Victor caught her hand as she reached for a box of pasta. "But now? This feels more real than anything I've ever done." Elise studied his face. "Are you okay with real? Because real means grocery stores and burnt pancakes and learning that I'm terrible at parallel parking and I sing off-key in the shower." "You sing in the shower?" "Loudly and badly." Victor grinned. "I can't wait to hear it." They spent the next hour wandering through aisles Victor had never thought about, with Elise explaining the mysteries of meal planning and bulk buying, and why you should never shop when you're hungry. She was patient with his questions. "What's the difference between all-purpose flour and self-rising flour? Why do we need 3 different types of onions?" And only laughed a little when he tried to put a $50 bottle of truffle oil in their cart. "Victor, we're making spaghetti and meatballs, not dining at Le Bernardin. I like good ingredients." "Good doesn't always mean expensive." She put the truffle oil back and selected a reasonably priced bottle of olive oil instead. "Sometimes it just means fresh and simple and made with love." By the time they got back to his penthouse, Victor was carrying 6 bags of groceries and feeling oddly proud of himself. "I can't believe people do this every week. Most people don't have grocery delivery and personal shoppers," Elise pointed out. unpacking ingredients on his kitchen island. Most people do this because they have to. And you? Do you do it because you have to, or because you want to? Elise paused, considering the question. Both, I guess. I do it because I have to eat and I can't afford to eat out all the time. But I like it. I like the planning and the shopping and the cooking. It makes me feel grounded, connected to something real. Victor watched her organize ingredients with practiced efficiency, and something settled in his chest. Teach me. What? All of it. How to plan meals and shop smart and cook something more complicated than toast. I want to learn how to take care of you properly, how to take care of us. The word us hung in the air between them, simple and profound and absolutely perfect. Okay, Elise said softly, but we're starting simple, no truffle oil. For the next 3 hours, Victor's kitchen became a classroom. Elise taught him how to properly chop an onion without crying, use a sharp knife and breathe through your mouth, how to brown meat without turning it into hockey pucks, medium-high heat and don't move it around too much, and how to taste as you go. Salt and pepper are your friends, but start with less than you think you need. He was terrible at it. He cut the onions too big, burned the garlic, and somehow managed to splash tomato sauce on his shirt, the counter, and the floor. But he was also completely focused in a way Elise had never seen him outside of business meetings, asking questions and taking mental notes and refusing to give up even when the meatballs came out looking more like abstract art than food. This is harder than running a board meeting, he muttered, trying to flip a meatball that immediately fell apart. Different skill set, Elise said, moving to stand behind him and covering his hands with hers. Here, like this. Gentle, but confident. Victor was acutely aware of her body pressed against his back, her hands guiding his as they worked together at the stove. This is very distracting. What is? You, touching me while I'm trying to concentrate on not burning our lunch. Elise smiled against his shoulder. You'd better get used to it. This is what domestic life looks like. Domestic life, Victor repeated, testing the words. I like the sound of that. When they finally sat down to eat at his dining room table, which Victor admitted he'd never actually used before, the pasta was slightly overcooked, and the meatballs were an interesting shape, but it was the best meal Victor had ever had. This is good, he said, genuinely surprised. It's really not, Elise laughed. The pasta's mushy and the sauce is too acidic, and I think you put twice as much oregano as the recipe called for. But we made it together. We made it together, she agreed. Victor set down his fork and looked at her across the table, hair pulled back in a messy bun, wearing his shirt with the sleeves rolled up, sauce on her chin and happiness in her eyes. I love you, he said suddenly. I love you too, even if you're a disaster in the kitchen. I'll get better. I know you will. Elise reached across the table to take his hand. We both will, at all of this. After lunch, they ended up on his couch with coffee and the Sunday crossword puzzle, Elise curled against his side while he read clues aloud. It was domestic and ordinary and absolutely perfect. 7 letters, Victor read. Clue is what lovers share when words aren't enough, Elise thought for a moment. Silence. That fits, Victor wrote in the answer, then set the puzzle aside. Is that what this is? Silence when words aren't enough. Sometimes. Elise tilted her head up to look at him. Sometimes it's grocery shopping and burnt pancakes, and learning that the man you love doesn't know how to work his own dishwasher. In my defense, it has a lot of buttons. It has 3 buttons, Victor. That's 3 more than I'm used to. They spent the rest of the afternoon talking about everything and nothing. Victor told her about the recurring dream he'd been having, where he was late for a meeting but couldn't find his shoes. Elise told him about the novel she'd been writing for 3 years, but was too scared to let anyone read. As the sun set over the city, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Victor realized that this lazy Sunday of domesticity and laughter and ordinary intimacy was what happiness felt like. Elise? Thank you. For what? For teaching me that the best part of having everything is having someone to share it with. Elise shifted in his arms, pressing a soft kiss to his jaw. Thank you for letting me teach you. And as the city lights began to twinkle below them, Victor understood that love wasn't just passion and desire, it was also burnt pancakes and grocery lists, and learning to build a life together, one ordinary perfect moment at a time. The most beautiful moments in love happen when you stop protecting your heart and start sharing it completely. 3 weeks later, Elise stood in front of her bathroom mirror at 6 a.m., staring at her reflection and trying to calm the butterflies in her stomach. Today was the day Victor was meeting Mrs. Patterson, her elderly neighbor and closest friend, and somehow that felt more nerve-wracking than introducing him to her father. "You're being ridiculous," she told her reflection. "Here's just coffee and gossip, with a 78-year-old woman who thinks every man under 50 is too young to be serious about anything." But Mrs. Patterson wasn't just any neighbor. She was the woman who'd brought Elise soup when she had the flu, who'd watched old movies with her every Friday night for 2 years, who'd held her while she cried after her father's stroke. Mrs. Patterson's approval mattered in ways that society galas never could. A soft knock on her apartment door interrupted her spiraling anxiety. Elise opened it to find Victor, holding a bouquet of sunflowers and looking almost as nervous as she felt. "Are those for Mrs. Patterson?" she asked, touched by the gesture. "I researched her favorite flowers," Victor admitted, stepping into her small apartment. "Sunflowers represent loyalty and devotion. I thought that seemed appropriate for someone who's been such a good friend to you." Elise felt her heart melt a little more. "You researched her favorite flowers? I may have also researched her favorite books, her opinions on current politics, and the fact that she volunteers at the animal shelter every Tuesday." Victor set the flowers down gently. "I want her to like me, Elise. She's important to you, which makes her important to me." "She's going to love you," Elise said, standing on her tiptoes to kiss him softly. "But just so you know, she's going to ask you very personal questions, and she has no filter whatsoever, such as whether you're serious about me, when you're planning to propose, and how many children you want." Elise watched Victor's eyes widen slightly. She grew up in a generation where people didn't waste time on relationships that weren't going somewhere. And what should I tell her? The question hung between them, loaded with implications they'd been dancing around for weeks. Elise looked at Victor standing in her tiny apartment, this powerful man who'd learned to grocery shop and burn pancakes for her, and felt her heart squeeze tight. "Tell her the truth," she said quietly, "whatever that is." 20 minutes later, they were knocking on the door of apartment 3B. Mrs. Patterson opened it almost immediately, as if she'd been waiting by the window, which she probably had. "Elise, dear." Mrs. Patterson was a small woman with silver hair, bright blue eyes, and the kind of no-nonsense demeanor that came from surviving 78 years of life with grace and humor. She wore a floral house dress and pearls because, as she'd once told Elise, you never know who might stop by and first impressions matter. "Mrs. P, this is Victor," Elise said, feeling like she was introducing her boyfriend to her grandmother. "Victor, this is Mrs. Patricia Patterson, the woman who's kept me fed and entertained for the past 2 years. Victor stepped forward and offered the sunflowers with a slight bow that was formal enough to show respect, but not so formal as to seem mocking. "Mrs. Patterson, it's an honor to meet you. Elise talks about you constantly." Mrs. Patterson accepted the flowers with a pleased smile, but her sharp eyes were studying Victor with the intensity of a detective examining evidence. "Well, aren't you handsome? And polite. Come in, both of you. I've made coffee cake and I want to hear everything." Mrs. Patterson's apartment was the opposite of Victor's sterile penthouse, every surface covered with photographs, books, and the accumulated treasures of a life well lived. The coffee table was set with her best china, and a coffee cake that smelled like cinnamon and home. "Sit, sit," Mrs. Patterson commanded, settling herself in her favorite armchair with the air of a queen holding court. "Victor, tell me about yourself, and don't give me any of that corporate nonsense. I want to know about you as a person." Victor, who'd faced down hostile board meetings and international negotiations without breaking a sweat, suddenly looked like a teenager meeting his girlfriend's parents for the first time. "Well," he began carefully, "I run a company here in the city, but more importantly, I'm completely in love with your friend, Elise." Mrs. Patterson's eyebrows rose approvingly. "Direct. I like that. How long have you been in love with her?" "About 4 years and 3 weeks, Victor said without hesitation. "I just didn't realize it until recently." "And what took you so long to realize it?" Victor glanced at Elise, who was watching this interrogation with barely concealed amusement. "I thought love was supposed to be unmanageable, something you could control and schedule and fit neatly into your life. Elise taught me that real love doesn't work that way." "How does it work?" "It turns your entire world upside down and makes you grateful for the chaos." Mrs. Patterson sat back in her chair, studying him with new interest. "That's a very mature answer for a man who looks like he's spent most of his life avoiding chaos." "I have," Victor admitted, "but Elise makes chaos feel like coming home." "And what are your intentions toward our girl?" Victor didn't hesitate. "I intend to love her for the rest of my life, if she'll let me." The simple sincerity of his answer seemed to satisfy Mrs. Patterson, because she smiled and poured coffee with the air of someone who'd just made an important decision. "Good answer," she said briskly. "Now, Elise tells me you've never watched Casablanca. This is a travesty that must be corrected immediately." 2 hours later, they were sitting on Mrs. Patterson's ancient sofa, watching Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman fall in love in black and white. Mrs. Patterson provided running commentary. Men today could learn something from how Bogart treats a lady, while Elise curled against Victor's side, her head on his shoulder. "Play it again, Sam," Bogart said on screen, and Mrs. Patterson sighed dramatically. "Most romantic line in cinema history," she declared. "I thought it was 'Here's looking at you, kid,'" Victor said. "That's the most famous line. There's a difference." Mrs. Patterson turned to look at him seriously. "Romance isn't about grand gestures and expensive gifts, young man. It's about seeing someone completely, their flaws and fears and imperfections, and choosing to love them anyway." Victor looked down at Elise, who was trying not to cry at the movie's ending, and felt something shift in his chest. "I'm beginning to understand that." After the movie ended, and they'd shared coffee cake and stories, Mrs. Patterson walked them to the door. She hugged Elise goodbye with the fierce affection of someone who'd become family by choice, then surprised Victor by hugging him too. "Take care of our girl," she whispered in his ear. "Always," Victor promised. As they walked back to Elise's apartment, she was unusually quiet. "Penny, for your thoughts," Victor said, taking her hand. "She likes you," Elise said softly. "I can tell. Mrs. Patterson has very strong opinions about people, and she likes you. I like her too. She reminds me of what family should feel like." Elise stopped walking and turned to face him. "Victor, when Mrs. Patterson asked about your intentions—" "Yes? Did you mean what you said? About loving me for the rest of your life?" Victor cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs tracing gentle circles on her cheekbones. "I meant every word. I know it's fast. I know it's crazy. I know we haven't been together very long, but—" "I love you too," Elise interrupted, "for the rest of my life. However long or short or complicated or beautiful that might be." Victor kissed her then, soft and deep and full of promises that tasted like forever. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. "Come upstairs," Elise whispered. "Elise, come upstairs," she repeated, her voice stronger now. "I want to show you what love looks like when it's completely unguarded." Victor's eyes darkened with understanding and desire, and something deeper than both. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." They climbed the stairs to her apartment in silence, hands linked, hearts racing. Once inside, Elise turned to face him, suddenly shy but absolutely certain. "I've never felt this way before," she admitted. "Not with anyone." "Neither have I," Victor said, moving closer until they were chest to chest. "You're the first woman I've ever truly wanted to give my heart to." "Then give it to me," Elise whispered, reaching up to unbutton his shirt with trembling fingers. "All of it, no holding back." Victor caught her hands, stilling them against his chest where she could feel his heart hammering. "Elise, if we do this, there's no going back for me. You'll have all of me forever." "Good," she said, rising up on her toes to kiss him, "because you already have all of me." What happened next was tender and passionate and absolutely perfect. Two people who'd found their match in each other, finally letting down every guard and sharing everything they had. It was Victor whispering her name like a prayer, and Elise showing him what it felt like to be completely accepted. It was laughter and tears and the kind of vulnerability that only comes when you trust someone with your whole heart. Afterward, they lay tangled together in her small bed. Victor's arms wrapped around Elise as she traced lazy patterns on his chest. "I have something to tell you," Elise said quietly. "What's that?" "I've been thinking about your penthouse." Victor tensed slightly. "What about it?" "It's beautiful and expensive and completely soulless," Elise said matter-of-factly. "And I think you should sell it." Victor was quiet for so long that Elise wondered if she'd overstepped. When he finally spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "Where would I live?" "Here," Elise said simply. "With me. In my tiny apartment with the leaky faucet and the neighbors who play music too loud and the radiator that sounds like it's dying. You want me to move in with you? I want us to build a life together, a real life in a real place, where we cook dinner and argue about whose turn it is to do dishes and create memories in every room." Elise shifted to look at him directly. "I want home to be wherever we are together." Victor stared at the ceiling, processing this unexpected turn. "My penthouse is worth $15 million. I know. Your apartment is maybe 800 square feet. I know that too. I've never lived anywhere that wasn't perfectly designed and professionally decorated. And how has that worked out for you? Victor laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest. You're right. It's been lonely and sterile and about as homey as a 5-star hotel. He looked at her, his eyes soft with love and wonder. You really want me to move in here? Into your world? I want us to create our world, together, starting with this tiny apartment and seeing where it leads us. Victor rolled over, pinning her gently beneath him, his eyes bright with something that looked like joy. Elise Warren, you are the most extraordinary woman I've ever met. Is that a yes? That's absolutely a yes. Victor kissed her deeply, pouring all his love and gratitude and amazement into the gesture. When do we start? How about now? Elise smiled up at him. I'll need to clear some closet space, and you'll need to learn to live without a walk-in wine cellar, but I don't need a wine cellar, Victor interrupted. I just need you. And as the afternoon sun streamed through her tiny apartment windows, Victor Langford realized that sometimes the best investment you can make isn't in property or stocks or business ventures. Sometimes it's in choosing love over luxury and building a home in someone's heart. True love isn't tested by perfection. It's proven when everything falls apart and you choose each other anyway. The call came at 2 a.m. on a Thursday night, 3 days after Victor had officially moved half his wardrobe into Elise's tiny closet and discovered that sleeping in a queen-size bed with someone you love is infinitely better than sleeping alone in a king-size bed. Elise answered her phone without checking the caller ID, her voice thick with sleep. Hello? Elise, honey, you need to get to the hospital. Now. The voice belonged to Dr. T. Martinez, and the urgency in her tone cut through Elise's sleepiness like ice water. What's wrong? Is it Dad? He's had another stroke. A severe one this time. The ambulance is bringing him in now, but Dr. Martinez's pause said everything. You should come quickly. Elise was out of bed before the call ended, Victor instantly awake beside her. What is it? He asked, already reaching for his clothes. Dad, another stroke. We have to go. Elise's hands were shaking so badly she couldn't button her jeans. Dr. Martinez said, she said to come quickly. Victor was dressed and at her side in seconds, his hands gentle and steady as he helped her with her clothes. It's going to be okay. We'll get through this. Victor, what if... No. His voice was firm but tender. No what-ifs. Not right now. Right now, we just get to your dad. The ride to the hospital passed in a blur of city lights and half-spoken prayers. Victor held Elise's hand while his driver navigated the empty streets, and she found herself clinging to his strength like a lifeline. At the hospital, they were met by Dr. Martinez's grim expression and a flurry of medical terminology that boiled down to the worst possible news. David Warren was dying. The stroke was massive, Dr. Martinez explained gently. We've stabilized him for now, but there's been significant brain damage. I'm sorry, but you should prepare yourself. Elise felt the world tilt sideways. How long? Maybe hours, maybe days. I wish I could give you more certainty. They spent the next 6 hours in David's hospital room, taking turns holding his hand and talking to him, even though the doctors weren't sure he could hear them. Victor had called in favors to get the best neurological team in the city, but they all said the same thing. There was nothing more to be done, except wait. It was just after dawn when David's eyes fluttered open, surprisingly clear and focused despite everything. Elise, he whispered, his voice barely audible. I'm here, Daddy. I'm right here. Elise leaned closer, tears streaming down her face. And Victor? I'm here too, sir, Victor said, moving to stand beside Elise. David's eyes found Victor's face with effort. Take care of my girl. Always, Victor promised, his own voice rough with emotion. Good. David's breathing was labored, but his gaze was steady. Elise, baby, I need to tell you something. What is it? I'm proud of you. So proud of the woman you've become, the strength you've shown, the love you've found. David's eyes shifted between them. This is what love looks like, what your mother and I had. Don't let anyone tell you it's not real because it happened fast. The best things in life, they don't wait for perfect timing. Elise was crying too hard to speak, so she just squeezed his hand and nodded. Promise me something, David continued, his voice getting weaker. Promise me you'll be happy, both of you. Build something beautiful together. We will, Victor said, when Elise couldn't find her voice. I promise. David smiled then, peaceful and content. Then I can rest easy. He closed his eyes and slipped away so quietly, so gently, that for a moment they weren't sure he was gone. But then the machine stopped beeping, and Dr. Martinez came in with soft condolences, and Elise's world shattered completely. Victor held her while she sobbed, his own tears falling silently into her hair. They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other in the face of devastating loss, learning that love doesn't protect you from pain, it just gives you someone to share it with. The next week passed in a haze of funeral arrangements and legal paperwork, and the endless small details of death. Victor handled everything he could, making phone calls and coordinating with lawyers, and somehow managing to turn grief into action. But it was Mrs. Patterson who held Elise together, arriving with casseroles and tissues, and the kind of fierce maternal love that doesn't require blood relation. "Your father was a good man," she told Elise on the morning of the funeral. "And he loved you something fierce. But honey, you can't honor his memory by drowning in grief. You honor it by living the life he wanted you to have." The funeral was small, but meaningful. David's construction crew, former students from when he'd taught night classes, neighbors from their old building, people who'd known David Warren as a man who worked hard and loved deeply, and left the world a little better than he'd found it. Victor spoke at the service, his voice steady despite his own grief. "David Warren taught me that love isn't about what you can provide. It's about who you choose to become. He showed me what it means to be a father, a friend, and a man of integrity. And he raised a daughter who embodies all of those qualities." After the burial, after the small gathering at Mrs. Patterson's apartment, after all the condolences and shared memories, Elise and Victor finally found themselves alone in her apartment, their apartment now, facing the silence that grief leaves behind. "I don't know how to do this," Elise said, sitting on their bed and staring at the black dress she needed to return to the funeral home. "How to live in a world where he doesn't exist anymore." Victor sat beside her, pulling her gently into his arms. "One day at a time, one breath at a time, together. What if I can't? What if I'm too broken now? Then I'll love you broken until you feel whole again. And if you never feel completely whole again, I'll love you exactly as you are." Elise looked at him through her tears. "How can you be so sure?" "Because your father was right. This is what love looks like. Not just the happy parts, but this too. The grief and the fear and the days when you can barely function. I want all of it, Elise. The joy and the sorrow and everything in between." They held each other in the gathering darkness, and Elise realized that Victor was right. Love wasn't just flowers and romantic dinners and perfectly choreographed moments. Love was also showing up in hospital rooms at 2 a.m. and holding someone while they fell apart and choosing each other even when the world felt like it was ending. "There's something I need to tell you," Elise said quietly. "What?" "The life insurance money. From Dad. It's substantial. More than I expected." She pulled back to look at him. "I want to use it to start that community center I told you about. The one I've been dreaming of for years." Victor smiled through his own tears. "He'd love that. Will you help me? Not financially, I don't need your money for this. But help me plan it, build it, make it something Dad would be proud of." "Elise, there's nothing I'd rather do than help you build something beautiful in your father's memory." She kissed him then, soft and grateful, and full of the kind of love that grows stronger in darkness. "I love you, Victor Langford. I love you too, Elise Warren. Forever." 3 weeks later, Victor was in their tiny kitchen attempting to make dinner. He'd graduated from burning things to merely overcooking them, when Elise's phone rang. She'd been sorting through her father's belongings, a painful but necessary task, and Victor had been giving her space while remaining close enough to help if she needed it. "Elise Warren," she answered, her voice still carrying the subdued tone that had become familiar since David's death. "Ms. Warren, this is Robert Harrison from Harrison Enterprises." Victor's head snapped up at the name. Robert Harrison was the CEO of their biggest competitor, and more importantly, the son of the woman who ran the Harrison Foundation, the same foundation where they'd endured that disastrous gala. "I'm calling about your boyfriend, Ms. Warren." "Victor Langford." Elise felt her stomach drop. "What about him?" "We're prepared to make you an offer. $5 million to end your relationship with Mr. Langford and leave the city permanently." The words hit Elise like a physical blow. "I'm sorry, what?" "You heard me correctly. $5 million cash in exchange for walking away from Victor Langford. You see, Ms. Warren, Victor is about to be offered the deal of a lifetime, a merger that will make him one of the most powerful men in the country, but that deal comes with certain social requirements. A wife from the right family with the right background, you understand." Elise's hands were shaking so hard she could barely hold the phone. "And you think I'd take money to walk away from the man I love? I think you're a practical woman who understands that you and Victor come from different worlds. This offer allows you to build whatever life you want, just somewhere else, with someone more suitable to your background. The condescension in his voice made Elise's vision go red. Mr. Harrison, let me be very clear about something. I wouldn't walk away from Victor for $5 million, $50 million, or $500 million. And if you ever contact me again with this insulting offer, I'll make sure everyone in the city knows exactly what kind of man you are. She hung up before he could respond, her entire body shaking with rage and hurt and disbelief. Elise? Victor appeared beside her immediately. What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. Worse, she said, her voice hollow. I've just been offered $5 million to leave you. Victor went very still. What? Elise told him about the call, watching his expression grow darker with every word. When she finished, the silence in their tiny kitchen was deafening. There's a merger, Victor said finally, his voice carefully controlled. Harrison Enterprises wants to partner with us. It would be significant, career-defining. And Robert Harrison mentioned that his mother had concerns about my personal choices affecting the company's image. Victor's jaw was tight with barely controlled fury. I told him that my personal life wasn't up for negotiation. But the merger is important? It's the biggest deal of my career. It would essentially make Langford Industries the most powerful company in our sector. Victor looked at her directly. And I don't give a damn about it if it means losing you. Victor, no. His voice was fierce, final. I know what you're thinking, and the answer is no. I'm not choosing business over you. I'm not choosing money over love. I'm not choosing their approval over your happiness. Elise felt tears start to fall, not tears of grief this time, but tears of overwhelming gratitude and love. You'd really walk away from everything you've built? Elise, look at me. She did. I built that company to prove I was worth something, to prove I could succeed without anyone's help. But you already proved to me that I'm worth something. Merger or no merger, fortune or no fortune. Victor took her hands in his. I spent 41 years accumulating things. Money, property, success, respect. And none of it made me happy. You make me happy. This life we're building together makes me happy. What if you regret it? The only thing I'd regret is letting you walk away. Victor pulled her closer. Elise, I love you more than I've ever loved anything in my life. More than money. More than success, more than approval from people whose opinions don't matter. You are my home, my heart, my future, and no one is going to take that away from us. Elise threw her arms around his neck, holding him tight enough to hurt. I love you too, so much it scares me sometimes. Good, Victor murmured against her hair, because tomorrow I'm calling Robert Harrison and telling him exactly where he can put his merger, and then I'm calling my lawyer and making sure you're protected from any more harassment. And after that? Victor pulled back to look at her, his eyes bright with love and determination. After that, we start building our community center. We build our life. We build our future. He cupped her face gently. We build something real and beautiful and completely our own. As they stood in their tiny kitchen, holding each other while dinner burned forgotten on the stove, Elise realized that her father had been right. The best things in life don't wait for perfect timing. They arrive exactly when you're brave enough to choose love over everything else. And sometimes the greatest victory isn't winning everything you thought you wanted. It's discovering that you already have everything you need. 6 months later, the David Warren Community Center stood on the corner of 5th and Main in Brooklyn, its red brick facade warm and welcoming under the autumn sun. Through the large windows, children could be seen playing while their parents attended job training classes, elderly residents chatting over coffee, and teenagers working on homework at tables that had been donated by local businesses. Elise stood in the center director's office, her office now, reviewing applications for their new scholarship program when familiar arms wrapped around her waist from behind. How's my favorite community leader? Victor murmured against her ear, pressing a soft kiss to her neck. Your only community leader, Elise laughed, leaning back against his chest. And I'm good. Great, actually. We just got approval for the after-school tutoring program. Dad would be proud, Victor said softly. Elise turned in his arms, still amazed by how naturally he'd stepped into David's role, not as a replacement, but as someone who understood that love means carrying forward what matters most. He would be, she agreed, straightening Victor's tie, a habit that had become as natural as breathing, especially since you're teaching the financial literacy classes. Who would have thought that a former CEO could explain budgeting to teenagers? Someone who learned that the best investments aren't always measured in dollars. Victor smiled. the kind of smile that still made Elise's heart skip after all these months. Speaking of investments, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Elise's breath caught. "Victor, I know we said we'd take things one day at a time," he said, dropping to one knee right there in her office, surrounded by after-school program flyers and community garden proposals. "But I've realized something, Elise. Every day I choose you. Every morning I wake up and choose you. Every night I fall asleep grateful that you chose me back." He opened the box to reveal a simple, elegant ring. Not the massive diamond she might have expected from a billionaire, but something beautiful and meaningful and completely perfect. "This was my grandmother's ring," Victor said, his voice soft with emotion. "The only person in my family who understood what real love looked like. She told me once that the right ring finds its way to the right woman when the time is right." Tears were streaming down Elise's face. "Victor, Elise Warren, you taught me that home isn't a place, it's a person. You showed me that love isn't something you earn through achievement. It's something you give and receive freely. You made me believe that I'm worth loving just as I am." His voice broke slightly. "Will you marry me?" "Yes," Elise whispered, then louder. "Yes, of course, yes." Victor slipped the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, then stood to kiss her deeply, while somewhere in the distance, children played and life went on, and love won another small victory in a world that desperately needed more of them. When they finally broke apart, both laughing and crying, Elise looked down at the ring on her finger. Simple, elegant, real. "It's perfect," she said. "So are you," Victor replied. "So are we." Through the window they could see Mrs. Patterson leading her senior citizen book club, James and Sarah dropping off their daughter for art class, and dozens of community members using the space that had been built from love and loss, and the belief that everyone deserves a place to belong. "Dad would have loved this," Elise said softly, watching an elderly man teach a young boy how to play chess. "He would have loved seeing you this happy," Victor corrected. He would have loved knowing that his daughter found someone who sees her the way he did, as extraordinary, exactly as she is. As the afternoon sun slanted through the windows of the David Warren Community Center, Elise and Victor stood together, planning their future and honoring their past, proving that sometimes the greatest legacy isn't what you leave behind, it's what you build together. She still came back to this neighborhood every day, but now it was filled with the laughter of children, the dreams of families, and the quiet satisfaction of work that mattered. And Victor had learned that the most successful business deal of his life wasn't a merger or acquisition. It was choosing love over everything else and discovering that when you invest your heart wisely, the returns are immeasurable. Final message. Love doesn't wait for perfect timing. It arrives when you're brave enough to choose connection over protection, vulnerability over control, and partnership over power. Elise proved that dignity is the most attractive quality anyone can possess. Victor learned that true success isn't measured by what you accumulate, but by who you choose to become. Together they discovered that the most beautiful love stories aren't about finding someone perfect. They're about finding someone who makes you want to be the best version of yourself. Their love reminds us that the right person doesn't complete you. They inspire you to complete yourself, then choose to share that wholeness with them. Because in the end, love isn't about fairy tale endings. It's about two people deciding every single day to build something beautiful together. Your participation means everything. What would you have done in Elise's place when offered $5 million to walk away from love? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your engagement helps us create more stories that celebrate the power of authentic love and the courage it takes to choose your heart over everything else. Thank you for joining Elise and Victor on their journey. May their story inspire you to believe in love that's worth fighting for. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.